Mitch Shah, Scary Campfire Story, Mitch Shah.
Thank you, Parker. Tonight, I'm going to talk about a scary campfire story. I'm going to talk about a 200-year-old monster that is about to disrupt our lives. Does anybody have any guesses or want to make guesses what my subject for tonight will be? I'm going to talk about the legend of the national debt. $14.3 trillion. What does that mean? Last week in Table Topics, Ravi brought the subject up. National debt, raising its ceiling. And I started to wonder, what is this national debt? Is this some kind of money? $14.3 trillion, unconceivably large bit of money that somehow was born on this planet Earth, thrown to the moon, from there projected to Saturn's, hit its rings, and to some other celestial body. What is this $14.3 trillion? The key is in understanding that $14.3 trillion is just not one pool of money. These are millions of promises made to people like you and me who buy US Treasury bonds. Even if you're not a holder of US Treasury bonds, you might have a savings or checking account. And the interest that is being paid on those accounts quite possibly will be backed by US Treasury bonds. Other countries, like China, owns about $1 trillion in US debt. They add up to $14.3 trillion. Japan owns Treasury bonds. That adds up to $14.3 trillion. And I'm now going to walk through this timeline as to how all this $14.3 trillion came into existence in the first place, or how the national debt came into existence. So I'm going to go back to the 1830s. I'm first going to talk about Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary to the Treasury Department. And before I do that, let me ask Jeevan, you have $1,000 and you want to buy Treasury bonds. So I'm the government and I give you the certificate to buy the US Treasury bond for $1,000. My question to you is, why do you buy it?
Hoping that it is going to be secure and when
Exactly.
the time comes, the government would pay back.
Exactly. That is precisely the reason why we all buy US Treasury bond. We trust the government. But how does this trust develop? That was what Alexander Hamilton understood. But the president of that time, Thomas Jefferson, wasn't quite in sync with what he wanted to say. Alexander Hamilton mentioned that one way to build this creditworthiness of the US government, is to have a national debt. You have more national debt, you will have more credit. The key, though, is in paying it back. And why do you want this national debt? Why do you want this credit? Because you want to trade with other nations. And that is the reason you want national debt. So national debt sounds to be a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. So now let me fast forward a 40-some years when the government was always having a national debt. So now I go back to the 1830s, or go forward to the 1830s, and I come to the time, the 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson. He absolutely passed, the concept of national debt, he just did not want it. He thought it was all bad. So what does he do? 6 years in the office, he works hard to veto every possible bill that has some expenses related to it. And 6 years into the office, he as expected, he has now a surplus instead of a national debt. But does this mean that the life was rosy and people lived happily ever after? No, that was only for one long, beautiful year. This was the 1835, when the first time the debt was paid off. The government now had surplus, but it lasted only for one long, beautiful year. Came 1837. There began a real estate bubble. Because now there was a surplus of money, which fueled the real estate prices. And came the real estate bubble and a depression that lasted until 1844. So now I'm going to fast forward a little bit further. Every time there were some expenses that had to be made, a bill would come to Congress and they would ask for the national debt to be raised, to borrow money against the national debt. But then what happens when the World War I comes along? There were so many bills to be passed for expenses. 10 tanks to be built, 5 planes to be built. And this overwhelmed the Congress. So what does the Congress do? It outsources the expense part to the Treasury. And it caps the ceiling as to how much the government can borrow or the Treasury can borrow. And that came into being what is today's national debt. And every time Congress raised the ceiling, the Treasury could borrow more money. And now, all of us know that the national debt is going to be raised, and the government is only playing chickens before it eventually lands up raising the national debt. Thank you.